J'appelle Melusi Simelane de Southern Africa Litigation Center, numéro 420. 5 minutes, allumez la caméra. Melusi Simelane. Melusi.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, and thank you for the opportunity. I must apologize for taking time to join in. My colleagues were supposed to join in, but we're delighted as the Southern Africa Litigation Center to make this statement before all. We are, as an organization, quite troubled by the developments of human rights in Africa, particularly the attacks on human rights defenders, the attacks on LGBTQ rights, and the development in South Sudan. Allow me to just speak briefly about the attacks on human rights defenders in Africa. In this context, SALC seriously is disturbed by the most recent developments in Eswatini, where human rights defender Tanele Masego, who is Thulani Masego's widow, continues to be exposed to harassment by state authorities. On the 28th of March this year, while traveling back to Eswatini, Mrs. Masego was detained. Her passport and her cell phone were confiscated without any explanation by the authorities. This is only one of the scare tactics employed by the authorities to discourage and intimidate human rights defenders in their fight for accountability and the truth in the assassination of Thulani Masego. The tragedy for the Masego family is one example of the human rights defenders and their families and their relatives to endure their fight for the human rights enshrined in the African Charter. SALC reiterates the call for the Commission for an independent and impartial investigation into the assassination of Mr. Masego. On LGBTQ rights, laws that criminalize the association or advocacy of LGBTQ persons in Africa continue to be in danger. These laws and their applications increase the risk of violence and the violations against LGBTQ persons. This is contrary to the rights on the African Charter and the principles accepted by the African Commission in terms of Resolution 275 on protection against violence and the human rights violations against persons based on the actual or attributed sexual orientation. SALC is also concerned by the attempts by some member states to reverse the divisions by the courts that uphold the rights of LGBTQ persons. As seen in Kenya and Namibia, where a member of parliament in Kenya attempted to introduce a new law seeking to reverse the effects of the Supreme Court ruling ordering registration of an LGBTQ organization. In Namibia, lawmakers passed a bill specifically designed to reverse the ruling of the Supreme Court. Similarly, SALC calls on the Commission to set out that the rights of the LGBTQ people are protected under Articles 2 and 3 of the Charter, and communicate that state parties must guarantee such protections. Finally, Your Excellencies, on Sudan, SALC is appalled by the pictures of death and destruction from Sudan. The conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces is a horrific threat to civilian life. The targeting of civilians and deaths of civilians as casualties must stop. As the International Court of Justice pointed out in its jurisprudence, human rights do not cease to exist. In the latest report, the UN Human Rights Commission highlighted that throughout 2023, innocent civilians have been killed by hostilities in Sudan. Attacks on specially protected objects under international humanitarian law, such as the one on the East Nile Hospital of Khartoum in December 2023, must stop. Enforced disabilities, detention, sexual and gender-based violence, and the recruitment of children all constitute severe violations of international law. With the high number of civilian deaths and displacement that is ongoing in Sudan, the hostilities must come to an end. In conclusion, Your Excellencies, the Southern Africa Litigation Center appreciates the chance to express support for the confidence of the Commission's efforts to promote fundamental human and people's rights in Africa, as outlined in the African Charter. SALC pledges to help defend these rights wherever requested. I thank you.
Merci beaucoup à Monsieur Melusi et Simelane de Southern Africa Litigation Center. Nous avons votre statement et nous allons l'exploiter sur toutes ces questions liées aux droits des personnes qui sont discriminées sur base de l'orientation sexuelle et de violences basées sur le genre.